Well, we're still screwing around at the narrow gauge convention. I wanted to show you guys the modular railroads.
Oh,
yeah, because there's a whole bunch of really neat modular railroads. There were also a whole bunch of really neat layouts open.
Yes.
And we didn't get to see much of that. We got to see this much of the live steamers.
Right, that was it.
That's it. So we're just going to show you a bunch of the stuff that we did manage to see.
Yes.
The problem with the narrow gauge convention and all these really great train shows is they managed to pack about 500 pounds of manure into a 50-pound bag.
Exactly, in a state the size of California, and you've got a layout tour on this end and a layout tour on that end,
and there's so many neat layouts and just so much to do, and you want to do everything, and we have this nasty habit of trying to do everything, and then you don't get to do anything because
you're behind.
Driving all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
That's California. You take the 5 to the 15 to the 10. And then from that to the 101 to the 134.
And I thought that was just the Walmart parking lot.
Exactly. So all you ever do is drive, and you don't get to see anything. So we tried to be a little more concise in what we were doing, and the bottom line is you just don't get to see it that much. It's a big state.
It is. It's huge.
And it's over there. It's over there. It's over there. Anyway, here's a bunch of really cool stuff, including the modular railroads, which were amazing.
Right.
So this is the room they set up the modular railroads in. It was a pretty good sized room.
Yes, it was.
So they had a lot of really cool railroads in here. This one was really fun, kind of a Northern California logging railroad. And they're logging redwood trees.
Sequoias.
Very politically incorrect these days. But back in a day, that was, of course, the big money product coming out of Northern California was redwood trees. Anyway, it's sure a neat model railroad, isn't it?
I really like it.
They did a bang-up job on it. Here we see a large redwood. This is an O-scale railroad. A full-size redwood tree done to scale could be as much as 7 feet tall.
That is just crazy.
In this scale.
Wow.
What? Wow. So it's O-scale, but it's 30-inch gauge, ON30, which is so popular right now. But look at the neat models and that trestle. Check that out.
I just love it.
I love building trestle. Oh, somebody's fishing. I don't know what he's going to find in that little ditch. But
you never know.
You just never know. In California, you might pull gold nuggets out of it.
That's right.
But what a really, really neat modular railroad these guys have built. I've always had a hankering to build a logging railroad, and until just last year, I'd never attempted it. But we've started that logging railroad up on the upper level above the pinball machine.
Yes, we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah, it hasn't come very far just yet, but it's
a possibility.
It's a possibility, and I just love logging locomotives is the thing. These logging Malleys, saddle tank articulated engines, and Shays, and
Shay
Climaxes,
is my favorite.
and Heisler. Shay is just, those are just fun. So we already have the equipment for our railroad. We have a Shay, a Heisler, a 3-truck Shay, a 2-truck Shay, a Heisler, a Climax, and a logging Malley.
Wow.
And no railroad. All in 20th scale, of course.
Yes,
yeah, so
big stuff.
It's kind of large. But this railroad, one of the great advantages with O-scale, when you're doing the narrow gauge, you can pretty much fit it anywhere. It's about the same size as HO standard in terms of its need to take up space, but the models, the structures, everything is O-scale, so it's I think it's funner to build because you can see what you're doing for one thing. And these guys clearly could see what they're doing. What a really neat railroad.
Never know what happens when it's like your back is turned. This thing is canoe, so how did the canoes get in the front?
Now this was really unusual. These guys had built this tent and they'd done these night scenes in here. As I recall, this was NN3.
Yes.
Really just teeny, tiny. Runs on Z scale track NN3. But this logging railroad done in this kind of tent so that they could do things as night scenes. Now this was a fun railroad, wasn't it?
That is a blast.
These people were just having a ball, and then everybody that came over here had a ball. They called this the Moose Creek Logging Railroad. It was also an ON30 railroad, and they were operating it back and forth and back, and mostly they were encouraging the people who came over to run the trains. They'd hand them a controller and say, "You're driving." And the loads would all go down the railroad, and then they had an automatic unloading ramp down there, which would knock the logs off into a logging pond, and they'd come back the other way empty. I thought that was really a fun feature.
Now I gotta get to work, but not keep going.
I would hope so.
You can press in it.
Oh yeah, this is a really neat railroad.
Are you older than 9 years old? He's a 9-year-old. I still have a 9-year-old training dog. I'm old enough. So here's the logging pond that the logs all end up in, and the unloading ramp is just over here to the left. And as the train goes by that, you'll notice that the log loads are going to get ejected off of the flat cars and tossed out into the pond. Okay, quick trip to Japan.
Japan?
The high-speed trains in Japan. These guys have a modular railroad. They've modeled Japan and the high-speed trains there. How cool is that?
Oh my goodness.
You don't see that very often, do you?
No.
Little bit of everything, something for everyone. War is and speaking of foreign railroads, these guys are doing European trains.
I like that one.
Oh boy, I fell in love with this stuff over here. Mostly because I think we should go to Switzerland and ride their trains.
Absolutely.
And mostly what they've modeled here is Switzerland. They've got a little Germany, a little Austria, but mostly Switzerland. And I get it. You know, Switzerland has 1,600 miles of track.
Oh my goodness.
The other advantage to Switzerland is their railroads already look like model railroads.
Well, the bridges and everything,
I
yeah.
mean, tunnels and huge, look at this bridge.
How in the world do they make those?
What? But it does. It doesn't look real. It looks like a model railroad, and then you wouldn't believe it if you saw somebody modeling it. We need to pack a bag. I want to go.
A bag.
Yeah, a couple bags.
Couple of bags at least.
Off to Switzerland. Now here we see European narrow gauge tracks. The one over here, this is HOE, and we actually did a Tuesday show on a couple of different Tuesday shows on HOE in the United States, better known as HON 2.5. But it's N gauge, N scale, N gauge, HO scale, running on 9mm like an N scale train would. Now this is meter gauge, HOM, just a teeny tiny bit different than HON3. And up here is an accessory rack rail.
Oh, nice.
Is that it just snaps down between the rails, and now you can run your cogwheel trains on it. I want to play with that. That just looks so fun. That's just another meter gauge track next to it. And over, finger, come on, get it right. Okay. This over here is another HOE, but when they do dual gauge in Europe, this is how they do it. They have the standard gauge track go out over the top of the narrow gauge track, and the trains just roll off onto little buggies, and the standard gauge trains ride piggyback on top of the narrow gauge track. Is that cool or what?
It's confusing.
I love it. I want to see it in real life.
Yes.
Are you confused?
A little bit.
Okay, let's get an actual German to explain it.
So that's HOE.
Yeah.
This is HOM, and BIMO make actually two, one in 83 code and one in 70 code, which is by Shinohara. But they also make a rack track, and it comes as a kit, so you can look at it.
My.
And it's actually two lamels, half pitch offset. The other thing here is mostly on the German and Austrian, when they bring the HO car, they put it on little dollies and then they put it on the dollies so they don't have to transfer the load.
Okay, did you get all that?
No.
No. I think it makes sense once you're actually doing it, but this is one of those things like trying to explain the clarinet or something. You
got to do it.
You
with
just
your
got
own
to
two
do it.
hands.
Anyway, I wanna ride the rack rails in Switzerland.
Me too.
We rode the rack rail on Pikes Peak, and oh, good heavens. But in Switzerland, they're just as common as hen's teeth. Or they'll be rare no, they're just common.
They're just common.
And because, well, when your whole country's covered with mountains, if you want to go anywhere, this is how you have to do that, a rack rail. And I want to go over there and ride that. Also, their standard gauge and narrow gauge operations are generally speaking electric, which means that you get to build overhead wiring, catenary, if you're modeling their railroads. And then if you're going to do that as a modular railroad, can you imagine the complexity of moving this and hooking it up?
No kidding.
Wow. But they're doing it, and it was fun. I got a kick out of this.
No kidding.
Now down at the far end of the room, remember this railroad?
I do.
Every show we go to, these guys are showing up. They're from the Southwest down there, and they've modeled, it's HON3, isn't it?
Yeah.
The railroad runs really well. I've never seen them have any kind of mechanical difficulties with it. And they've used a really fun system where the trains travel one direction out in front of the scenery and the structures and everything, and then they return to the other end on a hidden track behind the backdrop, and then that allows the club to be back there and change out trains, and they've got a little tiny staging area and whatnot. But mostly they just let the trains go around in a big circle, but you're sort of unaware of the fact that they're going around in a circle because the return track is hidden. I think that's a rather clever and fun idea.
That's awesome.
And the railroad itself is so well done. And every time we see it, there's a different module or two here. There's a couple missing from the show before, but then there's new stuff that we've never seen. So I'm not sure how many modules these people have actually built. I shouldn't necessarily say guys except in the non-gender specific, because several of the members here are women.
That's right.
I love to see couples and the young kids getting involved, the young girls.
Bring in the whole family.
Bring the whole family.
It's fun.
Everybody gets a kick out of it. It's just a great hobby. And modular railroading is a way to get into it if you don't actually have a lot of space to build a railroad in your house. And when you're building a module instead of an entire layout, you can really focus on putting detail, really getting it looking the way you want it to look. Now this is something you don't often see on a 3-foot gauge railroad is a Seaside, but why not? A lot of narrow gauge railroads operated down to the Pacific coast, so it makes perfect sense.
It does.
Steve's railroad has always gone to a port at the Pacific. That's why he calls it the Rio Grande Pacific.
There you go.
Well, as the physicists say, what goes up must come down.
Oh, it's always sad.
And we have to recognize the gravity of the situation.
That's right.
So they had to take it apart. And I was this time really sad because I was like, I'm still filming. When I went over and filmed the Swiss railways, the trains weren't running because they were already taking it apart. I just, it's like, give me another minute. No, we got to take it anyway. But it was just so fun. Well, that was cool.
That was way cool.
That was so cool. I love those modular railroads. I used to do
Oh, really?
modular, but it's a lot of work.
I would imagine.
You've got to be dedicated to the idea because it's just as much work as having your own layout.
It is.
You got to build it, maintain it, and do all those things.
Yes.
But then on top of that, you got to haul it to the train shows and set it up and run it for days and be there, and you got to coordinate with everybody else.
I was just going to say, you better have some good teamwork going on there.
Yeah. So and there's some of these really great groups that are able to do that.
Right.
But, it's not for the faint of heart. It's for the hard-working individuals who want to build something really incredible. And we just saw a whole bunch of that.
We did.
And that was really cool. And that European stuff really caught my attention.
Oh, it did
especially,
mine too.
I just wish I could build one of every kind of railroad because now I want to build a rack rail.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
If we can't build one, we can at least go to Germany and ride one. So I think that should be on our agenda.
Yes.
I'm not sure what the German for agenda is.
And I forget. I
And then we got to go to Great Britain too because they have. Anyway, I digress. You don't cross the pond and ride it. So, anyway, I digress. But if you haven't been to the channel, pop over to the channel, and if you're not a subscriber, do subscribe. It helps us out because we can say we have subscribers, and it'll help you out because you can be notified every time we upload some foolishness. And the easy way to do that is to click the blue button. Are we ready? Sign! Blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here on Tuesday with some other kind of screwing around.